Star Trek wasn't the first sci-fi to create a non-interference policy towards pre-warp civilizations. However, it certainly popularized the idea among the general public. Not only is the Prime Directive probably the most well-known version of this idea, but it is now a nearly universal staple of science fiction. With the notable exception of Star Wars, which, to be fair, is usually ruled by an evil empire probably not concerned with the well-being of so-called primitive life forms, nearly every major science fiction show involving pre-interstellar travel aliens and exploration has a Prime Directive. From Doctor Who to the Orville, the Prime Directive, or some variation of it, is even a popular proposal for why humanity has yet to discover evidence of alien civilizations in the real world. So, I could very easily sit here and make a video about how the Prime Directive, as we see it carried out through Star Trek, is morally wrong. I could throw up episodes like Symbiosis or Homeworld and explain how Starfleet takes the Order far too extremely. Then I could cite episodes like A Private Little War, Pen Pals, or The Killing Game to show how horrifically inconsistently it's enforced. And finally wrap it up with a little clickbait confusion about Starfleet being cold-blooded murderers working to further their own agenda. But I wouldn't be the first person to do so, and I wouldn't be the last. Even Star Trek itself is starting to do it.
Have you ever considered that the Prime Directive is not only not ethical, but also illogical, and perhaps morally indefensible?
So I'm not gonna do that here today, because I often see a fundamental misunderstanding about the Prime Directive in discussions about its morality, which seriously undermines its opponent's arguments. And to be clear here, while I do believe some form of non-interference policy is good, I strongly disagree with the way the Prime Directive is handled by Starfleet, particularly in the 24th century. So for now, let's set aside the question of whether or not the Prime Directive is morally right or wrong, and instead let's try to understand the thinking behind it and understand why the Prime Directive is so strictly enforced in the first place. Because yes, the Prime Directive makes absolutely no sense, but I don't think it's supposed to. First, let me explain what I mean by that. Before Enterprise was released, the Next Generation was very fond of giving us situations where most people would say the Enterprise crew had a moral obligation to intervene, yet the law said they could not. In those situations, Picard would usually give a small speech about how the Prime Directive exists to promote alien cultures from the unforeseen consequences of humanity's good intentions. And he would back this up by citing the fact that every other time humanity has tried to intervene in another culture's affairs, the results are always disastrous. However, this argument is usually massively overshadowed by Starfleet's willingness to allow entire planets to be destroyed by completely natural and preventable causes, as if somehow guaranteed extinction is less damaging to a culture than a possibility, even an extremely likely chance, that their culture might get contaminated in a way that could maybe lead to extinction in the worst case scenario, especially when the crew could save an alien race in a completely undetectable way, such as diverting an asteroid. And in cases like this, non-interference really is morally wrong, objectively so. However, if we ignore these, shall we say, questionable interpretations of the Prime Directive, and really look at Picard's argument, it's actually incredibly persuasive. If humanity has tried, say, 1,000 times to save an alien race from some natural event which that species lacks the means to prevent themselves, and all 1,000 times the end result is worse than had they not interfered, well, then a very strict Prime Directive makes perfect sense. Heck, this could even defend Starfleet's decision to let entire planets die. After all, dying to a mega asteroid or supervolcano is almost certainly better than dying extremely slowly to the post-atomic wasteland of some sort of world war. If Picard's claim were true, then it doesn't matter whether or not it makes sense that humanity's help would lead to disaster. It only matters that, for whatever reason, it always has. In other words, the Prime Directive would make no logical sense, but it isn't supposed to make sense because it simply works in practice. Of course, the most important part of such an argument is always the first word, if. And so, we come to Enterprise. Before 2001, Picard's argument could simply be accepted as fact. After all, the writers of TNG could say whatever the heck they wanted about this era, and we'd simply have to accept it all as true. However, It fell on Enterprise's shoulders to give us a look at these so-called disasters humanity's help supposedly leads to. And while they do give a commendable effort, I believe this is probably Enterprise's biggest failure, as such arguments in favor of the Prime Directive take place in episodes like Dear Doctor, which advocates not vaccinating a species against a disease because evolution says they should die, and the all-too-easily misunderstood Cogenitor. Meanwhile, there are a handful of examples where violating the Prime Directive seems to work great for everybody. However, I still believe that on a closer examination of these episodes, a real and solid justification for the Prime Directive's existence emerges in all of them. Well, except for Dear Doctor, of course. Other than my considering it to be deeply morally reprehensible on every level, we don't actually get to see the result of the virus or the effect of humanity's interference is, well, humanity chose not to interfere. Also, because the legitimate ruling government body officially asked for our help, and we are giving them the vaccine, not the technology to make it, which they already have, the future Prime Directive would no longer apply in this specific case anyway. So yeah, Dear Doctor just sucks. Revolutionary conclusion, I know. But I'm getting off track. Looking through the 98 episodes of Enterprise, I've identified 7 Prime Directive-related episodes other than Dear Doctor, and they all seem to fall into one of 3 categories. First off, and surprisingly the largest category, is that where violating the as-yet non-existent Prime Directive seems to have gone well. This category includes the episodes Terra Nova, Civilization, and North Star. However, after a closer look at these episodes, I think you'll find that it's not quite the nail in the coffin against the Prime Directive as this may at first seem. Let's start with North Star. This is the Season 3 episode where the crew discover a Wild West town in the Expanse full of primarily humans and a minority Skagaran population. And that alone should be enough to show us this isn't exactly an alien culture and shouldn't really count. Sure, it's different to the Earth of the 22nd century, but this town clearly follows 19th century American culture extremely closely. And that culture isn't alien to the American Archer and Trip, not to mention it was Skagaran interference with Earth that led to the bad situation in the first place. A situation clearly worse for both parties than if the Skagarans had their own Prime Directive and humans had not been kidnapped as slaves hundreds of years ago. And Terra Nova is a similar situation. While the Novans may not know it at first, they are the descendants of a group of human children who were abandoned after the death of their parents and forced to fend for themselves to survive. They are no more an alien culture than American or Canadian culture is to that of England. Heck, if anything, Novans are less alien given the shorter time frame involved. This is humanity dealing with its own internal business, not messing around with aliens. Hence, the Prime Directive wouldn't apply here either. Finally, though, we have Civilization, which at first glance may seem like a tale encouraging interference. A pre-industrial planet is suffering from a plague it doesn't understand, and Archer decides to help and ends up fixing the problem. However, let's not forget that this illness was the result of an alien mining operation poisoning the local population. If anything, Archer did everything in his power to live by the Prime Directive. He didn't just land a shuttle in the town square and expose the alien presence, he did everything he could to work in secret, involve as few locals as possible, and keep his true identity hidden. He merely did his best to put an alien culture back on track from someone else's disastrous interference. Something I think most interpretations of the Prime Directive would actively call for. And again, if those other aliens had their own version of the Prime Directive, none of this would have been necessary in the first place. Okay, so that's our first category covered, but just because there isn't an example of violating the Prime Directive going well, doesn't mean that following the Prime Directive won't end horribly. As we're ignoring Dear Doctor, that means it's time to look at our second category, which I call the Reverse Prime Directive. This includes Carpenter Street and Carbon Creek, where the Prime Directive was followed with humans as the pre-warp civilization, and it went not only well, but unnoticed by history. In Carbon Creek, a group of Vulcans crash land on Earth and are forced to live as humans for an extended period of time, and all goes well. One of the Vulcans chooses to stay behind, but manages to live a life completely unnoticed by humanity. Meanwhile, Carpenter Street is actually an example of the legitimate temporal Prime Directive being followed successfully by Archer in 2004's Detroit. While the one Vulcan's decision to stay behind would be a violation of the Prime Directive, each of these incidents is proof that such a policy could work in practice, and non-interference is both a possible and achievable goal long-term. It's not really an argument for or against such a policy itself, but it is all the proof Earth should need to believe such a policy could easily work given the justification. Justification brought to us by our third and most complex category, those disastrous consequences Picard promised us. This category includes the episodes The Communicator and the aforementioned Cogenitor. The Communicator practically explains itself, so I'll start there. In fact, the episode literally does explain itself. So I'll let Archer and T'Pol handle this one.
We've changed their perception of the Alliance.
They now believe their enemy is capable of creating genetically enhanced soldiers, not to mention particle weapons.
And thanks to that Suliban ship, they also think the Alliance has developed invisible aircraft.
On an incredibly politically unstable planet already geared for war, it's not hard to imagine the global war that likely happened next. That species may not have split the atom yet, but humanity only developed the atomic bomb because of the threats caused by a world war. And while our World War I may have negatively affected nearly, if not all, of the 20th century, remember, Star Trek's Earth never fixed any of its Cold War era problems, and history went quite differently, meaning its World War I was not only directly or indirectly responsible for everything ours was, but also the eugenics wars, Bell riots, World War III, and the post-atomic horrors of the 21st century. Post-atomic horrors only ended because of a chance contact with the Vulcans. Add to all that, this episode's species is never referenced in canon outside of this episode, and it's not hard to assume the worst. Now, one nightmare example like this is never enough to justify complete abstinence. Eugenics wars, genetic engineering. And the truth is, Enterprise alone was never going to give us enough examples to justify the Prime Directive, unless it was all the show ever did. But I think that perhaps our infamously misunderstood episode, Cogenitor, gives us an example of why we shouldn't interfere that allows us to comfortably accept there are other examples we don't see. Between those examples on other ships, in the decades between Enterprise and the establishment of General Order 1, or the centuries of Vulcan space exploration under their own Prime Directive, not to mention the countless bad examples of Prime Directive violations in Discovery and especially TOS gave us before Starfleet got really serious about non-interference, as well as the negative aftermath of Starfleet's interference Lower Decks is now showing us, there should be plenty of unseen justifications for the Prime Directive. However, before we get into why Cogenitor actually works, we first have to discuss why many people believe it doesn't. The primary cause for morally disliking this episode seems to be based on a belief this is an LGBT rights episode, as the protagonist is a third sex. And I get the LGBT angle. I even saw it on my first watch through. After all, that non-binary pride flag on my wall is more than just a makeshift green screen for making Eagle Moss thumbnails. When viewing the episode under this light, it's easy to see the conclusion is Captain Archer berating Trip for standing up for the rights of the oppressed and fighting for a better life for Charles, which, in case you forgot, is also the Cogenitor's name. The moral of this story then becomes to not support minorities or to seek a better life for all people, which is clearly wrong. Thankfully though, despite Rick Berman's view on gay rights, this is not what the episode is about. At least, not primarily. Yes, the Cogenitor is about Trip standing up for the rights of someone who is being discriminated against purely because of their sex. But Cogenitor acts as a cautionary tale of how not to fight for the rights of individuals on an alien world, because there is clearly and unquestionably an injustice happening in this society. An individual wants freedom and the ability to choose what happens to them in their own life and is being denied that solely because of their sex. And that is an injustice that should be remedied. However, the belief that a member of Starfleet can just walk into this situation after meeting 3 random individuals and fully understand, let alone fix the problem, is equally foolish. And Trip's actions make Charles's suicide practically inevitable, which is the real reason Archer berates Trip at the end of the episode. Firstly, let's assume that all or nearly all Cogenitors are like Charles and are extremely unhappy with their situation and want freedom. And let us acknowledge that this is an if. this is an alien species, and it's entirely possible that the vast majority of Cogenitors are biologically hardwired to enjoy and seek out male and female mates above all else, and that they not only enjoy their life of servitude, but thrive in it. However, even if this is the case, there is still an injustice being done by denying the option of a different life. So we're going to assume all Cogenitors are like Charles because, as you'll see, it actually doesn't really affect the situation. Secondly, we have to recognize the fact that you cannot simply walk into a caste or slave-based society, such as this one, and simply free the slaves. Again, to be clear, any sort of slavery or caste-based society is wrong and should be fought against. However, it takes more than just walking into a country and declaring slavery ended. If that is all you do, you would turn a population of slaves, or in this case Cogenitors, into a population of homeless, penniless, jobless, and hated refugees, arguably in a worse position than they were in before. The Cogenitors should be allowed freedom, absolutely. However, there needs to be some form of government action or program to help them get a start on life and to live in a society like the men and women. Government action that needs funding, planning, organization, and more than just a foreign power stepping in and demanding Cogenitors be let free. Just think about how quickly certain Bajorans became fanatical about castes in a person's proper place in just the span of a day or so. Now imagine trying to tell people like the Vizians we see that all of a sudden Cogenitors have rights and can do whatever the heck they want. Do you honestly think Cogenitors who literally don't even own the clothes on their back are going to find opportunity and shelter on their own after something like that? And thirdly, we have what is probably the largest and most relevant problem with Trip's actions. This isn't simply a case of a slave race or a sexist people. Cogenitors are a unique and vital part of this species' reproductive process. We learn from the Vizian chief engineer. Wait, this guy really doesn't have a name? We learn from Kala's husband that
they make up about 3% of our population, which seems to be perfect ratio.
And
do you know how long we've waited to be given a Cogenitor?
So, this is a planet that already seems to be under a decent amount of pressure to meet the demand for Cogenitors needed for reproduction. And furthermore, any decrease in the availability of Cogenitors has the potential to destabilize their natural biological balance. And if you aren't sure why that would be a major, potentially world-ending problem, imagine if humanity's roughly 50-50 split of males and females suddenly became a 95% male, 5% female ratio. Suddenly the human race would find itself unable to match each death with a new birth, and the population would enter a sharp decline as there simply wouldn't be enough females having enough children. The result is that it would become only a matter of a few generations before the human race goes extinct after a slow collapse of society. Or a massive and unprecedented shift in society would be needed, likely involving coordinated government action to ensure each female has enough births with enough males to counteract deaths, likely moving females around various male-only households with fathers looking after the children. In other words, a program much like the Cogenitor program. And now you can hopefully see why this isn't simply a discrimination problem, but something far more complex. The Cogenitors have a basic right to freedom, unquestionably. But how many Cogenitors deciding not to procreate does it take for Vizian populations to start to decline? 30%? 23%? 5%? The point is, we have no idea. Maybe enough Cogenitors would want to or feel the need to procreate, it wouldn't be an issue. Maybe every single Cogenitor is necessary. And how would those who refuse be treated by the rest of society? Especially in the event of a population crash. You could easily end up with Cogenitors facing a similar situation as the black population of America during the worst of the 20th century, or many anti-war protesters and draft dodgers throughout history. The Cogenitors deserve a choice of freedom, but have an essential and unavoidable role in not just society, but biology. So tell me, all-knowing Charles Tucker III, What is the solution here? Do you compensate the Cogenitors for their work? How much compensation for a life of servitude is fair? Is that work forced or voluntary? Is there even such a thing as fair in this situation? How do you support Cogenitors who choose to leave the system, huh? Where does all the money come from for these new programs? Do you even know what Cogenitors do biologically? Have you even the faintest idea if whatever that is can be replaced with something artificial? Can you honestly tell me that you were right to go up to this Cogenitor and promise utopia in a day if they just want it? Well, Trip, what's the answer? Look, I'm not here to defend the system, behavior, or actions of any of the Vizians or their government, and Trip was absolutely in the right to want to help and make things better. But this is exactly the kind of situation the Prime Directive exists for. Any good and decent human would want to step in and do something about this situation.
I might agree if this was Florida or Singapore.
But this isn't Earth, or humanity. And this is a situation we simply do not have enough information to know what to do. For all we know, these specific Vizians are hyper-sexist and conservative members of some sort of Cogenitor KKK, and there is a bill right now making its way through Vizian government to finally reform the Cogenitor situation once and for all. If Trip really wants to make a difference, he should research the issue, learn more about Vizian society and the complexities surrounding the Cogenitor oppression, and then choose his next course of action and fight for a well-thought-out and informed solution that ultimately benefits all, if he still believes there is a problem. In the words of the Vizians themselves.
But it's easy to misunderstand someone when you know nothing about their culture.
And ultimately, that's the thing. Is the viewer, it's easy to forget that for everything else it does, Starfleet is a single organization. A military organization. Working under a much larger government, be it United Earth or the Federation. It is not, and should not, be the place of any such organization or individual within such an organization to make these wide-sweeping political decisions. If an alien culture is behaving so horrifically that intervention is needed, let the democratically elected Federation Council decide what should be done. If a pre-warp alien species is facing some kind of threat, then let that same government decide if and how it should intervene. Yes, the Prime Directive is often taken too far by the Federation. And at the same time, yes, sometimes Starfleet captains play too loose with the rule. But the core idea of the Prime Directive is a sound and proven philosophy. We can debate when, where, and how the Federation should get involved in other species' affairs, but Starfleet is absolutely right to uphold the Prime Directive as its General Order 1.